Welcome everybody. For those that are coming in now, we are Spiela. And ultimately, Spiela is a platform where opportunity providers and opportunity seekers meet. So we're all about access and providing access and creating a space where those that we don't otherwise get the opportunity to be in reach of or to contact and to speak to and to learn from, we make that possible at Spiela. So as you can see from kind of what we were saying here, again, it's just a network connecting our professional community to opportunities that will be hard to access and engage. Pretty much what I mentioned earlier. Now, just of course, just a disclaimer, we as ourselves and as an entity are not politically affiliated in any way. This Q&A will not be, again, a campaign podcast. It's just to provide insights on how to start a career in politics. And of course, we have the esteemed honour of welcoming Mr. Shaun Bailey, who is the Conservative candidate for Mayor of London. So today's topic will be on how to get into the world of politics. So myself, Ivan, the founder of Spiela, I will also be moderating today's call just to make sure we are efficient, on time, and make sure we get all to the necessary points and to the nitty-gritty of this exciting conversation. We have our special guest, Mr. Bailey, Conservative candidate in the 2021 Mayor of London elections, going up against Sadiq Khan of the Labour Party. And today he'll be joined by a fellow guest, which is Ryan, who's a member of the Spiela community and a grassroots activist and student, hailing from West Lothian. Am I correct, Ryan, in how I'm pronouncing it?
That's correct.
Thank you. Always worry about getting that one a bit wrong. Cool. So, of course, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we will get into it with some of our questions. We will have, of course, two questions from two members of the audience who submitted it earlier to us, Shaun and George. So, we'll get onto them. Without further ado, let's kick off proceedings. So this answer, of course, is for the both. So, of course, Mr. Bailey, feel free to go first. So we'd like to know your background and tell us a bit about your journey and your story and how it shaped you to becoming the man you are today and what inspired you to get into the world of politics.
Wow, thank you for having me. Firstly, Spiela is a brilliant idea. When I heard about this and my team came to me, I was chomping at the bit to get involved. This is a great platform and I wish you every luck into the future. And if I get elected, I guarantee you I come back. That's my first piece. I guarantee you that. Hold me to that. How did I get into politics? I hate politics. I've always hated politics and I will continue to hate politics. But what I do like is people. So for 20 plus years, I was a youth worker. I started my own charity. I ran a 60 plus day charity. I had such a great time with the people in my community. I always wanted to represent people and get involved. And for me, it wasn't politics, it was people. I didn't even realize at the time that I was involved in politics. I was just trying to set up my job club. I was just trying to get young people away from our local crime lords. I was just trying to develop opportunities for people because in that I saw an opportunity for me to develop as well, seeing that it was a win-win situation. What happened to me is I spoke at an event because I think if I talk purely about getting into politics, you need to decide what you want to do in politics. And don't get me wrong, it's like being a teenager. That will change, but you do have to have a start point because moving forward keeps you in the game. So I had spoken at an event. Some people from a think tank had approached me to come to a different event. And they're very sort of learned people. And they were, could you come and give us the raw, unfiltered experience of the street? We'd like our researchers to hear that. So I came and did that. And I think they slightly underestimated my ability. At the time, I could see their point, big academics, tracksuit, bandana, but people made assumptions about who I was. And I came to the event and I said I wanted to speak to them about how the European financing structure affected the advancement of my community. People were then scraping their jaws off the floor because they thought I was going to come and say, in it, man, it's tough on the street, da, 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 da. And I just got a different angle on the world. But that experience, that process brought me into the arena of politics. So I was in the research, I was in the think tank world, and I was trying to change opinion and get research done that way. David Cameron then saw me speaking at an event and he came to me, and I'll never forget this, and he said, exactly what we're looking for. Why don't you become a Conservative candidate? And to put it into perspective, that morning I'd had a fight in the car park with a drug dealer. So then when David Cameron comes to you in the afternoon and says you should be a Tory candidate, I literally said to the man, don't call us, we'll call you. I thought it was hilarious. I did. And I went back and I told the young people I was working with and they were absolutely furious. They were like, you spent all this time, Shaun, preaching to us about identify opportunity, get hold of opportunity, and you've let this one go by. So I had a little think. I went back and I said to David Cameron, I need to think this through because I needed to decide where my politics lies. Because then and now, the one thing I did know about politics is I don't like party politics. But for me as an individual, I did what I considered a study. I went to different events. Lib Dems in particular and Labour invited me to some things, and I decided for me, it'd be different for everybody else, that I was a conservative. I then went back to David Cameron and said, okay, I'll take you up. What are you going to do for me? And I think the important thing to understand is when to ask for something and when to offer something. And what I find is if you can find experienced people in any field, they are dying to give you something. So it's important to ask. One of the young people I used to work with, I gave him that piece of advice. He's a doctor now. He asked a doctor for something and they gave it to him, and boom, he went away and studied and did his career. So I got involved in politics by deliberately seeking out people who were interested in the topics I were, who were doing deeper studies, and then I had a chance encounter. I do a lot of bringing people into the party, and I give them the advice I give them. If you like the argy-bargy, the exchange of politics, become a council member. Because as a local councillor, you'll get plenty of that. You'll be face-to-face and in the chamber. And if you can become a cabinet member or the leader of your council, you can have real direct access and support people's lives, life-changing decisions you'll be making. I put it to you like this: the leader of the council has an enormous budget. Your local MP does not. If you are into the philosophy, the democracy of it, the rule setting, the law of it, then you could probably aim at Parliament, because obviously that's where that conversation's had. But that's a much longer, much more disappointing, much more arduous journey. But if you have something else you're doing in the world, that might not bother you. I would always say never, ever, ever, ever give up your life for politics. Always have something else that you are doing beside the politics. You have to be pretty far into politics to make it your only career. That would be a risk, a serious risk. But for me, I got involved because I like people, I like the issues, I'm willing to learn. I don't think the right are right about everything, and I don't think the left are wrong about everything, which means it's very easy for me to have conversations that expand my horizons. I spend much of my time speaking to the Labour members of the London Assembly, which I'm elected to, because I learn more from people I disagree with than people that I agree with, if you see what I mean. And if that's your state of mind, politics is the game for you. The word of caution I would sound: too many people, to my opinion, in politics are partisan. And if you're partisan, then you're wasting your intellect and you're misleading the public. And be wary of people who are trying to make you tribal, because that dumbs down politics. And to my mind, politics is the art of the possible, which means you must always be able to accept that the other side may be correct, or at least are looking in the right direction.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Bailey. No, very insightful, very kind of clear cut. Definitely not what I was expecting, but in terms of that response. But thank you so much for sharing. And now, of course, Ryan, kind of same question to you, right? What was kind of your inspiration to want to get into it? I know you're very passionate and do a lot of work up in West Lothian, so yeah, it'd be interesting to hear from you also.
Shaun definitely has more of an interesting story than me. I pretty much just joined the party and started campaigning. The reason I decided to get into politics, because I was and still am unhappy with the way the country is going. And in my opinion, you can't really complain about things that are going on in the world if you're not going to fight against it. Although what I'm doing is small, I like to think it makes a difference. And recently, with the independence referendum, Brexit, and the pandemic, more and more people are becoming concerned about the current state of our country, and yet not getting their voices out there. I think it's especially important for young people to get involved in politics, as these decisions impact their futures.
No, thank you very much for that. Thank you so much, Ryan. Nice, kind of concise. And what I love about talking to you, you always kind of get to the point, to the heart of the mission as well, and why it's so important to you. So it's always great to hear young people really inspired and getting involved in making local change. So kind of echoing what Shaun said, starting off in kind of local government to make a bigger impact to I guess, first your region and then to wider society. So no, thank you for that. So we'll move on to the next question. And so we'll have it up here now. More of just an experience question. Okay, again, targeted towards Shaun. So, Mr. Bailey, what were some of the key lessons you learned coming up as a politician, And what advice would you both of you give to someone getting started into it?
I think I'll go backwards. So I'm at a point now where people are always trying to tell you what you should think, always trying to bring you into disrepute, always trying to use the words of one of my young mentors, snake you. Either for you or against you, not prepared to have the debate. And why that's important to where you start, you need to be certain of who you are and where you are, but not be ignorant to adjustment. I always say to people, my principles are rock solid, my opinions can be changed. And so for instance, today I spoke to one of the chambers of commerce, and I had such a robust exchange with someone about funding of local councils and is the government's levelling up agenda great? And he was surprised at my willingness to cede to some of his points. You're right about that. And he would say, well, how can you? And I said, I can do that because for me, I'm in a party of a broad church. I feel there's a place for me there, and I'll always argue my place, my point. And I think that's important because that determines in many stages how far you can go. So if imagine you're a councillor and your council leader is a bit of an ignoramus, do you pipe down to get ahead, or do you stand up to tell your truth? It's a very important thing to think about on the way through. I remember I used to be special advisor to the Prime Minister. And I remember going in one morning and having a blazing row in what we used to call our big team meeting. And one of them came out to me afterwards and he said, well, that's your political career done. Do you know what I mean? So I said to him, did you not say what you believed because you think it'd be your career over? And he literally said yes to me. I have no respect for that person. I still work with them now. We're not in the same building as we were then, because he will go with any way the wind blows. I have principles that I like to push my issues through to see how they challenge my principles. And I think those experiences are important to you, because as you get older, as you get longer in the tooth, you have to really, you're only convincing if you really believe your point, if you believe what you're about. And the challenge with politics, particularly if you do party politics like I do, as opposed to issue-based politics, where one issue is nicely, clearly defined for you, how are you going to respond to other people's rubbish in your party? That's a tough one. Imagine what is your most preciously held political view. Imagine the leader of your party is very, very far away from that. How do you respond to that? And if you can start to negotiate those things in your mind, you at least have the personal, emotional space to be quite successful. What's interesting about the group of politicians I do my day-to-day goings on with, we have some very different views about things, but we are able to get along and come to an accord most of the time, not all of the time. And I find that process mind expanding.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Bailey. And again, it's always interesting to hear different insights from kind of the for and against argument of absolutely everything, right? I've always believed there's three sides, your side, their side, and the truth, right? So I guess a lot of time is spent trying to uncover what do all three facets mean. So no, it's great to hear that insight on that. So thank you. And Ryan, again, similar question to you. I know you're relatively new in it, but what did you do, I guess, propel yourself, I guess, right into the middle of politics and to start to see and make change?
Well, the advice I'd give to anyone wanting to get into activism is you don't have to know about every single aspect of politics. You focus in on something you're passionate about, be it animal welfare, equality, education, and you can campaign for that. You don't. I see a lot of people when they're joining the party that I'm in, they're concerned about knowing it all, knowing every single aspect of politics, and are quite intimidated to have a conversation with you because they feel that you're going to judge them. So I think I've met so many good people through politics, and I think my main tip is just not to be intimidated when you're getting started out.
Oh, no, thank you for that, Ryan. That's really cool. And no, thank you again for you to kind of really clear, concise answers and really detailed in terms of people wanting to have an interest in local politics and I guess the ins and outs, the do's, the don'ts. And so with that, we'll move on to the next question.
Mr. Bailey, young professionals have been hit hard by the pandemic. Opportunities have become scarce and entry roles require more and more experience. What advice would you give young professionals who are currently out of work, lacking direction, or feel as though they are not making a mark within their current career?
I would say first and foremost, your analysis is 100% correct. Even in, you know, what we would consider normal times, I think sometimes getting recruited, the way recruitment's done in this country seems to be becoming more and more narrow, which is something I fight back against quite hard in the position I'm in. Constantly saying to companies, you need to search in a different pool, because you will continue to find people like yourself, and your business doesn't need that. Your business needs variety for a number of reasons. That's my first thing. The second thing I would say is this: when you are, imagine yourself in an interview process, ask yourself what the interviewer wants. What does that organization want? And to me, it's, I would argue it's not experience. If it's experience, they shouldn't and wouldn't be talking to younger people. What they want is the correct attitude. What they want is people who understand their business, have something to offer to that business, and are excited about it, who want to build things. I have a few friends who are in banking, and one who does recruitment in particular for EY. And he said to me, what always inspires him is when a young person comes not to make money, but to make an impact. He's, you know, EY is about making money and they'll take care of that. But he's like, when a young person talks to us about our mission, when a young person talks to us about our social responsibility, that kind of thing excites him. He also says as well that being more rounded is an advantage. So I know when I've recruited people in the past, I'm not interested really in your qualifications. Your qualifications got you through the sift. You know, I read your qualifications on a piece of paper. What I'm really checking for is your attitude, your aptitude, and just your level of enthusiasm. I remember, wasn't it Churchill who said, an attitude is a small thing that makes a big difference? If you can impress upon someone what your attitude is and how you intend to be in that business, your entrepreneurial, I think that is the most important piece. And recently I did some work, well, I say recently, some years ago now, I did some work with advertising agencies seeking young people. And what they really, really liked was the activities that those younger people had been up to outside of looking for a job. So eventually, the two sort of most prized positions went to one girl who had built a portfolio of her activities, very active on social media, and had sort of over the years collected that stuff up and sort of presented a nice package. The point is, she was able to show her creativity over a period of time. And in that arena, that was very important. When I speak to people in the insurance world, I seen a young man get recruited because he understood where the new markets for insurance for this particular company were coming from. And he was talking about exciting opportunities. And the person recruiting that young person actually admitted to me afterwards that young person knew more about the future of the company than he did, because he was just focused on, you know, how they make money this week. And that young person was talking about how they make money into the next 10 to 15 years. And he said he'd never been so impressed in his life. And he said to me, that young person had basically gotten the job 15 minutes after arriving, because the process was of the young person saying, well, why do you do that? And how comes you haven't considered this? And he said to me, basically, we need that person in our business. And if you can get to that level, you can circumvent the fact that it is very tough now, and the fact that there is so many good people looking for each role.
No, again,
Thank you, Shaun. Thank you.
yeah, thank you for that. And I guess I want to counteract that a little bit. So, you know, kind of George, following your question, Ryan, based on your location and based on the situation up there, I know we do share some similar ties within politics, but how has the situation kind of been in regards to job opportunities or job hunting within West Lothian and beyond?
I'd say just as bad as the situation is in England as well. It's just people are struggling. The markets became saturated because you've got these really qualified, experienced people applying to jobs that before the pandemic would go to graduates. So I think in that case, people that have just came out of university, young people trying to get jobs, it is extremely difficult.
Yeah. No, of course, definitely understand that. Cool. Okay, so no, thank you very much for that. And so that kind of finishes that section of the question.
Sorry, I had a piece of advice of my own to George's question. I'd say stay motivated, take your time and observe your current options. The situation just now is difficult. It's a difficult time to start out in any field. Many of us find ourselves with more free time as we've had before. I'd recommend using this time to pursue voluntary experiences or certifications to boost your CV and open the doors to new opportunities. Spiela are currently looking for volunteers in various professions to learn and grow with our company. If you would like the chance to join our team, just reach out. We'd be happy to talk.
Thank you for that.
And the other thing I would sort of add to that as well is about your personal mental health in it all. Try to figure out what will make you feel resilient when you're continually getting turned down. The one thing that politics has in it is an awful lot of rejection in politics, mate. I tell you that. And you have to figure out a way of keeping going. I have a friend who's an actor, which again, an industry full of rejection. And he and I have had extensive conversations about how do we pick each other up after a real disappointment. I remember once not being selected for a seat in Upminster, and I didn't realize just how hard a knock that was for me until I'd gone back to him and had our conversation, because I had said to him beforehand, win, lose or draw, I will come back and we will analyze how I did so well or how I didn't do so well. And that process for me gives me closure on any particular thing. So I'm not carrying the mental health weight of being crushed every time. And being around like-minded, positive people is crucial. If you hang around with people who make all of your problems somebody else's fault, then progressing becomes very hard.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mr. Bailey. Thank you very much for that kind of topic at hand as well. And thank you, George, for your question. So we are going to move on a little bit to a more race-themed issue, Mr. Bailey. So what inspired you to actually want to be a member of the Conservative Party? There are currently 22 Black MPs out of 365 in the Conservative Party. Do you think that figure represents the society that we currently live in?
I think there's two ways to look at it. From a purely technical numbers point of view, the amount of Black MPs in Parliament is actually pretty close to the breakdown of numbers of people in the country. I think that's a very poor way of measuring our Black people being allowed to progress in politics. I think we have more than enough talent to fill the place 4 times over. So I would like to outperform the sort of mathematical situation. I think the other piece that's wider for me, somebody once said to me how important Black representation in politics is, and it is, but it's less important than Black representation in the boardroom. If I had to pick one or the other, I'd go boardroom every single time. That has much more positive ramifications for the Black community than politics in and of itself. I chose to become a Conservative because I have Conservative principles. I'm a church-going West Indian boy. You know, I believe in marriage and that kind of nonsense. I think a nation is a good thing. So for me, conservatism is real. It's my lived experience, as it were. It's the way my grandparents, brought us up. So for me, it was less of a deal. The race issue, I think, often is told by the Labour Party about the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party hasn't helped itself. So a friend of mine who's a very deep left-winger is constantly telling me off for being a Conservative. And I remind him, any failure the Conservative Party have had around race, and there has been some, to be clear, so has the Labour Party. And if you look at the power in the Labour Party, it's actually the unions. They sign up for everything, but the representation of Black people is way lower in that than it is in the Conservative Party. So look where the power is. Where are Black people at those really important crossroads that make a difference to the direction of society and the directions of our community? So for me, if the Conservative Party have failed in race, so has the entire British political establishment. It goes broader than race as well, because you need to look at gender as well. I have a friend who is a Black female minister. She's a rarity. I'm talking about Kemi Badenoch. She's an absolute rarity. I'd like to see that changed. And I actually think it's very important for Black communities to realise that we can and should have a broad range of views. We should have Black people on the right and Black people on the left, in the Conservatives, in the Lib Dems, wherever. It's very important for the integration and the power relationship that the Black community has with the country. To have all of our politics parked in one place means that we get taken for granted, because everybody knows politics responds to those who can change the direction of the number of seats in Parliament. And sitting in one place doesn't achieve that. But for me, the Conservative Party has been significantly more positive than negative about race. But I'm not a lunatic. I don't think it's all completely, kosher and doesn't need some change.
Thank you for that point. I mean, I just want to touch on maybe one thing you mentioned there, Mr. Bailey. So you say that, of course, a lot of the Black people, I guess, in Europe are kind of more left-leaning towards Labour. So I guess my question is, wouldn't that be kind of an accessibility thing? So are the Conservatives making it is there anything they're doing or not doing to want to get more fame, I guess, people within their party? Because you say, you know, it's a failure that, you know, if Conservatives don't have enough people, then I guess it's a whole establishment failure. But as you can see, Labour are probably doing a great job getting that. So why is it that Labour can attract so many black, I guess, people, and then Conservative, there's this belief that it's a racist party and that, you know, people will struggle to fit with it. People of colour will struggle to fit in with them.
I'd say two things. I don't think that their BAME representation within the party is any better than ours. Actually, our numbers are really quite big when you look at the full sweep of BAME, Indian, Pakistani. We probably match them. I think one of the advantages they have in this particular arena is that a lot of their support is based in urban environments where there's just more of us. It's a simple fact. There is more black people in Southwark than there is probably in the whole of Yorkshire. If you know what I mean, that's an exaggeration clearly. But the point is, you know, if your party's base tends to be in city dwellings, you have access to that. I think that how welcoming a party has two elements: how welcoming we are and how welcoming people say we are. I am a very big, I'll tell anybody who listen, a lot of the PR around the Conservative Party is done by the Labour Party. People will tell you, for instance, that Conservative members are racist. I had someone tell me this, not realising who I was. And I said to them, you know, who have you met that's racist? Well, no one. You know, let me know the situation, you know, and they tell you myths and stories. People tell about Enoch Powell, all kinds of stuff. And I told them, okay, so Enoch Powell did Rivers of Blood and was thrown out the party. 11 Labour MPs wrote to the then Prime Minister and said that no more black people should be allowed in the country, and 4 of them were promoted. So it's about the myths and stuff like that. I remember, I'm not trying to tell you Conservative have got it all right, because they clearly haven't. The idea that you don't see colour doesn't translate into meritocracy in most people of colour's mind. It translates into invisibility. If you don't see colour, well, how the hell are you going to see me? So that's been something that I myself and lots of people in the party spent years turning around, and we're making great progress with that, but there is still somewhere to go.
Sorry, can I jump in here? Your party leader and our Prime Minister has been well documented in making racist, homophobic, Islamophobic comments. What sort of message do you think that's giving to our younger generations of what's acceptable?
But again, I could tell you the same about Angela Rayner. She has made many comments, homophobic, racist, and certainly anti-working class. I could tell you the same about Sadiq Khan, who is Muslim, who said stuff about Uncle Tom Muslims. There's two things I'd say. Be careful of how things are spun. I'm not making any excuses for things people have said. Be careful how things are spun, because of course, I go back to my point that everybody on this call would immediately recognize, yeah, Boris has said things, but I wonder, have you ever read some of the stuff that Angela Rayner said, or some of the other Labour MPs? No, you don't, because it's very easy to get those things out in the public arena and people want to believe them. So that's the first thing. And let's be clear, some of why they want to believe them is because they have existed. It has been said. I'm not suggesting for a second it hasn't been said. To your second point, it shows one thing to young people and another thing I think young people should look at. So the first thing is this. It's a terrible example, isn't it? We shouldn't have that. And I think the fact that people have not had those debates and look at it is partly where cancel culture came from. So therefore we don't have them. So the minute that somebody says something that offends you, right, you cancel them and you don't have debate. And I think that locks politics and culture in one place, a very unhealthy place. And the second thing I would say, if you think that somebody should be held to a standard today that didn't exist in the past, fine, then hold everybody to that standard. Because what I find is Conservative MPs in particular are held to a much higher standard in these arenas than any other type of MP. Hence, I give you Angela Rayner. So you've had Labour MPs say things, and it's not a big deal. You've had Conservative MPs say things and people are calling for the heads and oftentimes get the head. And all I'm saying is if something's disgusting for one, then it's disgusting for all.
Do you condemn what your party leader has said in the past?
Listen, if you think you're the first person to ask me that question, you join the queue. I condemned them when it was said. I condemned them while it was said. I said afterwards. I've been on a show with Boris and said it to his face. Same with Angela Rayner. Now, I would ask you, would you condemn Angela Rayner to her face? Have you condemned what she said? The point is, people wield it as if it's some big stick. for me and other black people in the Conservative Party to run away from and not get involved in politics. But I'll take you back into the history of the Labour Party. The Labour Party is based on the union movement. I'll take you back into the history of the union movement. Committed racism, but it doesn't stop people joining the left. It doesn't stop people joining the party. So if I'm forced to look at what Boris may have said, Michael Howard may have said, David Cameron may have said, fine, but then everybody else needs to look at what their historical figures have said as well. Let's have that debate, and then let's see how we all come out at the end.
I'm happy to condemn anyone that's made comments like that. I am not just accusing Boris, but he is the most powerful person in our country. He leads our country, and therefore he needs to be a good example to our younger generation.
Yeah, and I think following on from what Ryan said, and to follow up some of what you said, Shaun, yes, Boris Johnson is the leader of the country and we should hold him to a higher esteem than everyone else. He's leading us on the world platform. But on the other side of that, what was your feeling? How did you feel about the Black Lives Matter protest last summer? Because one thing I saw that came out from last summer in the ways that the Labour Party and the Conservative Party acted, in particular, Priti Patel being Home Secretary, I didn't find her stance against Black Lives Matter to be helpful or anything in that way whatsoever. In fact, I felt like she came out as a Conservative completely against everything that was going on and not really got the spirit of what was happening in our movement at that time. So what are your comments on that?
So do you mean my place on Black Lives Matter, hers, or both?
Start with yours first.
Okay. So my thing with Black Lives Matter, I think the emancipation of black people was hijacked by a very well-organized, well-financed group of left-wingers. If you say to me, should this country and the world over do everything and more to give black people the equality that we need, absolutely. Of course, I have a vested interest in that happening. I am black, I have black children. Let's get it done. I think Black Lives Matter took some of the militancy too far. I think some of the things they're asking for, I personally can't sign up for. So the destruction of the nuclear family, for one, for me, I can't sign up for it. It was on their website. It literally was on their website. I was sat, the Voice asked me about why I said what I said. And I think it was BBC asked me why I said what I said. And I said to both of them at the time, please Google it. And the BBC reporter Googled it in front of me and was quite surprised. Because the point is, they took our 500-year-old struggle that we still haven't got over the line and attached all kind of other things to it. If it was purely the struggle for black people, sign me up. But you can't then smuggle other things through. That's the part that I didn't like. As for Priti Patel, look, Priti Patel has her very robust way of doing things. I think Priti Patel is speaking to a slightly different crowd than us. And I think if Priti Patel was not a Conservative politician, people have a different spin. You sound like you pay particular attention to what she's saying. So it'd be interesting to hear exactly what she did to make you feel that way. Because I think as Home Secretary, by saying that the protest was illegal in lockdown, right, she was correct. That's her job. And now, if you look at my stance was the protest should go ahead, because I am much more cognizant than a Home Secretary should be of the pressure that was in the black community, and it needed to be let out. My opinion was if that pressure didn't come out then, it would have come out some other way and probably some other time and probably more horrible. That's why I said what I said. But she is the Home Secretary. She's literally one of the cornerstones of our legal system, and our legal system had decided it was illegal. So it wasn't a surprise to me when she said what she had said.
Thank you very much for that. No, thank you very much, Shaun, for that insightful kind of answer. And again, being prepared, I guess very well prepared and knowing that, this is it, this is the situation. And for us, it's always good to kind of hear that from someone so directly close to the situation on the front ground, dealing with these things. And
sorry, Ivan, could I just say one more thing? Sorry.
For sake of time,
when we were talking about the issues within the Conservative Party and the Labour Party with racism in the past, you said that we should judge people we should only judge people on the standards of the past. Am I correct in saying that?
No. What I said was, if we're going to judge people on the if you're going to judge people today, so comments that are made today, comments that were made in the past, if you're going to judge them by the standards of today, then you have to do it to everyone. What I think we've done is been very selective in that. And I'm just saying, judge everybody, give everybody the same law. is what I'm effectively saying.
Thank you very much for that, Shaun.
Sorry, just wanted to clear that up.
No worries. Thank you very much for that, Ryan. So we will be moving on to the next question from Shalene Stanley Mitchell. So Shalene, please do turn your mic on for Mr. Bailey.
Yep. So my question for you, Shaun, is you're hoping to be mayor. After your 4-year tenure, how do you envision London to look like? And overall, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow, I mean, that's the biggie, isn't it? So there's some obvious things I'll say, which will be obvious to any American. So I want London to be safer. It is a statistical fact that London is more dangerous now than it's been in the last sort of 10 years. We've had 2 record years in a row for homicide, robberies up 73%, sexual attacks are up, I think 43%. I want to get rid of that. But I think in a sense, that's Mayor 101. Well, I believe everybody wants that. If I was to go a little bit deeper, I hope that me being involved in politics the way I am stands as an inspiration to poorer people, to Black people. And I don't think, Black people say, oh, Shaun did it, I can do it. What I hope they're thinking is, well, he's one of us, he's done a thing, I can identify the thing I want to do, I can get some people around me and I can do that thing. Much of my life has been vanguarding. I spent a lot of time as the only Black man in the room. It's time for that to end. It is time for that to end. There's people in our community with 50 times more talent than I have in their little finger. Where are they? Can I help them be where I am? My first gambit in that is to try and get somewhere to do that. The second piece is as well, I'd really like to leave behind a London full of opportunity and a London where young people are inspired by education. They're the sort of softer, inward heart things I have, because if you come from a background like mine, one of the big sort of hammers you have to swing is getting a good education. And I don't just mean getting a PhD or whatever. Yes, that's a sort of more obvious end, but I mean as well a good social education. When I look at my white middle class friends that I work with, some of the things that they have that you can't begrudge them for, right, is a confidence. There's a belief there. I talk to them and they believe that they're going to run the world. They believe that they're going to have 2 houses. They believe. And if I can do anything to bring more belief into our community about what we can achieve as individuals and collectively, that for me would make me sleep much better at night.
I just wanted to add in there, sort of what sort of practical things would you be implementing for us to, Okay,
I'll ask that. I'm desperately trying not to do a party political broadcast on you, but I'll do my best.
We can tell.
So look, from a policy point of view, I'm going to bring 8,000 extra police officers to London, 4,000 extra 4,000 extra youth workers to London, and 32 youth zones. Can't arrest our way out of our problems, must support young people to get ahead. I'm going to take some of the adult education budget and focus it on breaking the link between certain communities and jail by giving them the qualifications and the support they need to move into the job market. Because I think the best kind of communities are independent communities with their own income who determine their own lives. I believe in the agency of people and I want to do that. I'm building 100,000 homes for £100,000, because when I speak to Londoners, 87% of Londoners want to own. And I think the current mayor has crushed that dream. I want to help that dream. Not everybody can or wants to own, but I can massively expand who owns. And there's 2 reasons I want to do that. The system in which I'm going to use will mean it is cheaper to pursue this than it is to rent. So it'll always be cheaper than renting. And it will give people, young people in particular, and by young, I mean anybody under the age of 40, so that counts all of you in, it will give young people the opportunity to have capital. Because one of the things I believe is, one of the real differences between rich and poor people is understanding capital and having some. So our system should try to give you some. I'm going to do a lot around the environment, because unfortunately in London, we've decided that taxing people will help the environment. No, it doesn't. It just means we have an expensive environment that's also a poor quality environment. What I want to do is attack the source of the poor air quality. And there's 2 ways of doing that. One is to green the entire bus fleet, because the bus fleet, if you can make all of that green, 0 emission, that's the equivalent of taking 1.1 million cars off the roads of London. And we can do that without passing on the cost to Londoners. So high impact, low cost. I mean, that to me feels like a win-win. I mean, I could go on at
yeah, I'll stop you
but I'll
there.
stop
You
there.
save that for question time.
Yeah.
Shalane,
I'm trying my best though. I'm trying my best.
If you'd like some more, did that answer some of your questions, Shalane? Because there's plenty of other platforms that you can get his whole manifesto if that's what you want right now.
Sorry, could I jump in quickly? Do you not think it's quite ironic that you're doing all these things, but you're coming from a party that has stripped funding from law enforcement and from youth work?
There's two things I'd say about that. Firstly, law enforcement, certainly in London, when the money went down, so did the crime. The idea, and this is one of the chief weaknesses of the left, the idea that everything's about money is wrong. And I've been speaking to two ex-London commissioners, police commissioners, and both of them have said to me, be wary of any police officer, they were talking about senior police officers, beware of any senior police officer that tells you it's just about them having more resources. It isn't. Public service is never just about more resources. It's actually about what you do with those resources. If I learned anything from being a government special advisor, being in the cabinet office, the education department, it is more than just the money. It's what you do with the money. And a direct example of that is the last mayor of London had less police officers than the current mayor of London and had significantly less crime. It isn't just about the money. It's about what you do with that money. The second thing about youth work, there's no doubt that youth work has been cut back. That's largely decisions made by councils. I fully accept, though, that councils have had a very tight budgetary situation for the last 10 years. But the thing that people never point out is when this country had austerity, austerity was real and it existed. I accept that. Where did it come from? I see my Labour colleagues, people in left, constantly talk about austerity, but they never, ever talk about the fact that it was them who spent the money that left us the country in a state of need austerity. And remember, that's not my opinion, that's the public's opinion, because when they were given a choice between what was left behind by the Labour Party and voting for a Conservative government, they voted for a Conservative government. In fact, it was the first Conservative government that had had a majority in over 22 years. Austerity was ridiculous, painful, but it came from a place of poor financial control that affected the poor the worst.
Sorry, did you want to follow on from that, Ryan? Did you want to follow on from that?
For the sake of time, let's just move on. Yeah. I could talk about that all day.
Cool. No, thank you so much for that. And we do have 15 minutes remaining. So again, we have a few more preset questions. That's kind of all the questions from the Spiela members and the community, but we do have a few preset questions we can ask. So one will come from the preset, and one is just that's coming now, but it's more of just a personal opinion on things. So the question that is a personal opinion is the clap for carers. So we understand, that's a full gesture for all the NHS workers who have kind of put their lives out on the line during COVID. But what was your opinion on those that say they're rather financial support than standing out and receiving claps for putting their lives on the line?
I'll tell you a story that a maternity nurse told me. So she said she appreciated the clap for carers, but she didn't need it. And I said, wow, that's strong coming from you. And she said, because remember, Shaun, we're still being paid. She said, we should be focusing on people who are not being paid. And this was very early on. In fact, this was before the first clap actually happened. And she said that to me. She said, the work that we're doing in the NHS is important. It's risky because we are at high risk, but we are professionals. We signed up. We understand what this is like. She said to me, I'm much more concerned about the woman who runs our local corner shop, whose business is going out. And because she was saying to me, as a politician, how can you get her some money? I don't need free lunch. I just need to be able to get to the front of the queue quickly so I can get back to the hospital. And that for me, that pulled me up quite short, because I think, like everybody else, I enjoyed the idea of putting my energies into clapping. So I think it taught us the lesson that some things are prominent and they are easily supported. Other things are not so prominent, maybe even more important to support, but are difficult. And often we shy away from answering the difficult question, because supporting people without the proper paperwork, maybe more expensively, I think sometimes we shy away from, and we should grasp that level sometimes.
Much appreciated, and thank you for that insight, Mr. Bailey. I'm just wondering if anybody has any other questions before I proceed on with some of the more preset questions. If not,
just quickly, would you say the NHS workers? You said that they signed up for this work; they knew what they were getting themselves into. But would you say that any NHS worker predicted a pandemic of this scale when they signed up?
So to be clear, I never said that. Somebody else said that, who is an NHS worker, like my mum. She works in a GP surgery. Nobody signed up for a pandemic because nobody predicts these things. I think what she may have been saying is that NHS work is always dangerous. It isn't just dangerous in the pandemic; it's dangerous every day. I think is the point she was trying to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bailey. Yeah, no, thank you very much again, Ryan, for that. I'm of course conscious of time, so I will just proceed ahead with some of the pre-selected questions that have come in. So I guess, Shaun, on a more lighter one, what are some of your proudest moments so far that people may not be aware of?
I'm still married, which for me, don't laugh. No, it's serious. I kid you not. One of my sort of personal goals is to stay married. I've been married for 15 years. And I'm enjoying it. I'd have to ask my wife if she's enjoying it, but I certainly am. So I want to try and stay married. I'm an honorary colonel for the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, which I'm intensely proud of. And the reason I say, there's two reasons. One is a bit of a race reason, because when people look at Britain and you look at the constructs of Britain, the armed forces are more white and more English than even the Queen. And to be in a position where they're reaching out, trying to change the profile of who they are and how they behave, and to be part of that process, to me is intensely, I'm proud of that. I've had some very, very, very difficult conversations with them, and not once have they rejected me or pushed me away. I mean, there's been a lot of people looking at their shoes as I speak, but they've held on to that emotion and kept going, and I'm very, very proud of that. I did gymnastics for 22 years, and the love and joy that I got from my teammates and, going to competitions and training is beyond measure, just beyond measure. I'm a big fan of technology. I race drones and take photos and just, I have the odd photograph I'm proud of and that kind of stuff. And I'm particularly proud of my daughter at this point. She's 13 years old. She'll be 14 soon. She joined a new school, and in that time, she's been there a year, and she's only actually been there for 5 weeks. But she's hung on. She's done the work. She's done everything she can to maintain her mental health. And I'm just so proud of her ability to just hang in there. And I hope it's something that I can replicate in my own life.
Very much. Thank you very much. Unless anyone has anything to follow up, no, that was really.
One last thing, and my comic collection. I've got a massive comic collection. I'm very proud of my comic collection.
Thank you very much for that. So I guess now with everything that's been going on, especially with the world, hopefully things will slowly ease up from restrictions. So I guess, where would you suggest that people, young or old, go to or start looking at first in terms of maybe opportunities that we otherwise may not know about, or ways in which, okay, they've seen this interview, they're inspired, you want to get into kind of politics or know a bit more, where would you direct or point them towards going to?
I think there's two things I'd say. Speaking here with Ryan, Ryan is more impressive than maybe even he realizes. His forthright nature, his understanding of the subject and some of the history, and his just ability to express himself very succinctly. By the way, Ryan, you go far in politics if you can get to the point quickly. Very few of us can, particularly politicians. So there's two ways I'd look at this. Firstly, the knowledge piece. What made politics possible for me was having some life experience. I'm looking at people now on this call, and what life experience do you have? And any life experience you have makes any policy arena you get in that much more important. It just gives you something to filter it through. It gives you a way of allowing people to hang on to your words and understand where you're coming from. Really important. People who are born in politics and stay in politics are normally less useful than people who've come to it from somewhere else. That's the first thing. The second part of the knowledge is just literally the textbook knowledge. If you're interested in, I don't know, environmental issues as it pertains to politics, get some knowledge. If you like banking or financial structures or economy of politics, get some knowledge. One of the best things about this country, one of its greatest powers, is our civil organizations. You can join any number of think tanks to learn things in a deep way, do some writing, give yourself some background, something that when you're in politics, you can point to other people and say, look what I've done, look what I've been doing, this is where I've come from, this is a journey I'm on. I think that's important if you want people to support you. the other piece, of course, is arguably the simple end. You can go and join a political party. Now, there's two things I'd say about that. Firstly, think carefully about which one you join. Think very, very carefully. And second, please, please, please take your information from more than one source. Please. I am so tired of dealing with people who read the Telegraph only or the Guardian only and think that's the entirety of the world. One of the worst phenomenons in modern life is how well handled the public is. I cannot tell you how much control certain political groups have over certain publications, and it means you are obscured from learning the full truth. If you truly want to be of use to yourself, to your family, to your community, to the country, to the world, to humankind, please have a varied input on the knowledge that you then go out into the universe and argue on. I try my best to do that. I'm not saying I always succeed. I am only human. But if you are going to come in with that partisan thing, remember this: you'll never be special. 99.9% of people in politics are hugely tribal, hugely partisan, and hugely useless. Do something else. Be useful. Argue for the balance.
Thank you for that. No, thank you for that. Thank you very, very, very much for that insightful comment again, Mr. Bailey. I probably just only have one more after, but I don't know if I'm just seeing if anybody has any other questions to ask.
What we can do is we can open up the chat and have any questions submitted by the chat. We've only got about 5 minutes left, and obviously we'd like, interesting questions at this stage. We haven't got too long to answer them.
Am I okay to give my input on the last question, just how to get involved, how to get started in politics?
Yeah, you do that.
I agree with what Shaun said. When you're joining a political party, definitely do your research from more than one source, because there's a lot of people that have a lot of biased information on both sides of the political spectrum. And as well as that, don't think that a political party is always going to align with every single one of your views. That's never going to happen. But the good thing is with a political party is every member has a part in making policy. So within that party, you can get your views across, and you can try and get your values across. But my main point was parties are never going to match every single one of your beliefs. That's never going to happen. So don't go in expecting that.
Thank you very much for that, Ryan. So yeah, we just Shireen said we've got 5 minutes left. We're opening the chat space. It's open now if anybody wants to submit a final question, which we will then ask. So just give us. So we got one coming in. Okay. So Shireen, are we good to ask that one, as it was the first one to come in? Oh, you're on mute, Shireen.
Yes, I think we can good to go for us.
Sure, no worries. So from Mark, you mentioned not taxing Londoners. What do you think about the ULEZ and extension of congestion charge times when people are struggling through a pandemic? Would you change it?
I'm on record of saying I will not expand the congestion charge or the ULEZ. The ULEZ will not achieve the environmental uplift we want, and it will cost us at least £130 million to put those cameras in. That money is much better spent on buses, which will be the equivalent of taking 1.1 million cars off the road. Expanding ULEZ as well, London is struggling. I don't know how many of you are Londoners. I don't know how many of you have been out in London. London is struggling. And I think because a lot of people are on furlough, a lot of Londoners are able to work from home. I'm not sure people understand just how much London is struggling. That problem is yet to be woken up in many people's minds. Obviously, because of what I'm doing, I've been into London more than most, and I cannot tell you, just a ghost town. And London doesn't work for the poorest if London is not at work. Forget rich people. I'm sure they can pay their bills. They've got money offshore, whatever, who cares? The point is, poor people in London need people to be in London, as our employment is on the floor. And I think things like the congestion charge and ULEZ are clumsy tax raising policies. They're not policies that will clean our environment, and they're not policies, and they are policies that will slow our economic rebound. And I tell you about ULEZ, I don't know again how well you know London, excuse me my ignorance on your behalf, but the North and South Circular, the space inside that is enormous. The effect that could have on economic recovery in London, put it this way, the amount of people who live inside the North and South Circular would still make London the biggest city in the country by some way. I want you to understand the impact that that could have on London's finances.
Thank you. I just want to move you on because we've got a few more questions.
Yeah,
you mentioned London Transport. I'll just pop in this one.
Yeah.
Will you be saving zip cards for young people and getting some reduced fare travel back for young people? And that
100%.
question is from Kelso, I believe.
Why don't you give me 2 or 3 questions?
Yeah, because of the speed in which you're asking them, Shaun, we'll give you 2 or 3. Cool, go ahead. We've got lots coming in, lots.
So give me another question. Give me 3 questions and I'll answer them all at once.
So there's that one. So what are you doing for the zip cards? That one there. So there's also London. Kieran, London is struggling. How bad is it going to get before it gets better? And from Aisha, how are you planning to tackle the homelessness crisis and poverty in the city?
Right, let's talk about zip cards. Yes to keeping zip cards, and yes to keeping free over 60s travel. How I'll do that is use a sponsorship scheme that they did in Dubai. In Dubai, they raised $400 million by doing it, and their network is only as big as a district line. I calculate we could at least raise at least £500 million, which is more than enough to cover that. And obviously then you put any leftover monies you have elsewhere in the system. I'm also going to start a London infrastructure bank. The model is tried and tested. It's how they rebuilt the German economy after the Second World War by leveraging monies they have. We have in the region of 360 odd million pound I could put in there to leverage, because currently now borrowing money is at a historic low. This is the time to set something up like that. Homelessness, there's 3 things I'll do about homelessness. Firstly is my Homes First policy. I come from a youth work background and a job work background. So I know the pain of workers when they're told they can't work with people who have a drug issue or who are using. And that's only important because it's led me to the belief that you must have a Homes First policy. Get people into a home and then figure out all the other issues after that. The way in which you figure out the issues are twofold. One, you build more in London. So I'll build much more social housing for rent and much more part ownership to buy. That's one thing. And the third thing is we've got to support the charities that do this specialist work, because there's a large part of homelessness where homelessness is the symptom of something else in somebody's life. Mental health, drug use, family breakdown. So we need to support the charities that have the time and the skills to do that long-term piece of work. And that's how I'll do it. And when I talk about infrastructure banks, when I talk about sponsorship, that's how I add money to the bottom line of the mayor in order to give to these charities as well. Because anything access outside of these things, the mayor has the right to spend the money any place he likes. And I would do that. How bad is it going to be in London?
We've actually come on, we're at 8 o'clock now, and for the sake of tidiness, we would like to finish on time. So I'm going to finish you off there. Like I said, all of your information and all your manifesto is widely available. It's shared. I think a little leaflet actually came through everyone's letterbox. I think some people shared with me this week. So I'll hand over to Ivan to wrap up, but thank you. Sorry to cut you off mid-flow.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mr. Bailey. Of course, we'd love to have you further, but again, take the time and everything like that, it is. So thank you so much for thank you for much being on our panel. And this only, I guess, really helps and supports us and Spiela on our mission. And I'd like to thank our audience members for joining. This is what we're all about, connecting people to those otherwise you won't be able to see every day. So it is an honor to have Mr. Bailey, who is running for London Mayor, on our panel. So we'd like to thank you so much, and for everybody that's tuned in. Shaun, if you have any goodbye or any last words or anything like that, that'd be great.
I'm going to stop talking. I've talked so much, but let me just say, what you're doing here, right, is golden. The only thing wrong with this is that I didn't think of it. That's the only thing wrong with it. It's a really good thing you're doing here, because supporting people, giving them access, and I mean it. If I get elected, write me that email and said, you said you'd come back, and I will be back. If
I'll hold you to that.
Win, lose or draw, this is not the last time you see me.
That's what I wanted to hear. I'd also like to thank
you so much,
Ryan, for taking part.
Thank you, Ryan.
The team for working really, really hard to pull this together this last couple of weeks. To your to part of your team, Boo, who I was working with, who enabled us to set that up. Thank you. And to everyone in our Spiela community, please do come on the site, become a member, and look out for our next Q&A where we're going to be doing next month.
Thank you, guys. Without further ado, have a good night. Thank you. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. Cheers.